markets and rising costs. As highlighted in the Draghi report, the continent needs probably to boost financing for innovations and defense, whilst also continuing to show leadership in the clean transition, responsibly sustaining its social model and benefiting from its high-skilled workforce. And then you layer on top of that, of course, the Trump complexity with the latest threats, now rescinded of extra tariffs. So what is the way forward for Europe? I'm delighted to be joined by an all-stellar panel. Michael Martin, the Taoiseach of Ireland, Nadia Calvino, President of the EIB, Nicolas Hieronymus, the CEO of L'Oréal, Miloš Kospajic, Prime Minister of Montenegro, and Hélène Huby from the Exploration Company. So thank you all for joining us. Taoiseach, I think it's fair that we start with you. You're in charge of Ireland. There have been, we'll talk about productivity and what Europe can do better, but it's been quite a week for Europe. A lot of European leaders feel like maybe they've been pushed around by the US. I know everything's being de-escalated, but does it change your plans for Ireland in terms of more independence, supply chains, and the way forward?
Well, actually, to be frank, I mean, the European-American relationship is a vital one. There is very significant interdependence. There's significant interdependence all over the world. We are in a difficult space globally. It's a changing world, and there is, from our perspective, I think we have to be consistent in maintaining our focus on multilateralism, and Ireland will do that, Europe will do that. But also, yes, there is a sense that we have to become more self-reliant in Europe and develop stronger capacities, become more competitive. There's a lot we can do ourselves. We have a lot of barriers internally in Europe in terms of competitiveness and trade still within Europe. It's estimated, I think the Draghi would have said, it's more than any tariff imposed, the level of barriers that we've created within Europe in terms of different sectors. So I think that's the first thing. I think we need a capital markets union. We need to really move on that now with pace. We need more enlargement. I think the geopolitics demands momentum on the enlargement front, and Ireland's very committed to that and support that. We hope Montenegro will be, hopefully, when we assume the presidency, that by the end of our presidency, the end of 2026, that we'd have completed most of the chapters pertaining to their accession. These are all important issues for the geopolitical sense, but the de-escalation this week was very important. I think Europe's positioning was important. Yeah. The unity that was on show within the European Union. But what's critical is that we work now to maintain that relationship, because the alternatives really can't be contemplated.
Taoiseach, is Europe over-reliant on US investments, and are you working on new trade partnerships, and if so, with who?
Well, we have. I mean, already there's been significant work with Canada, with Japan, and there's been challenges on the Mercosur front. To be honest with you, we had difficulties as well on the farming agriculture. But yes, India is on the horizon in terms of a very significant trade deal between India and the European Union, and others, Australia and others. So there has been a counter-movement, if you like, developing more trade deals as an element of protectionism has come in and as tariffs have been imposed. But we managed to navigate the tariff issue, let's be clear, Europe did with the US, in a way that achieved a landing zone, if maintained and secured, and not changed or deviated from, does give us a pathway to a sustainable relationship.
Nadia Calvino, first of all, I mean, the way forward, because when you look at growth, it's, again, it's international, it's trade relationship, and then we'll focus on domestic. But what's the way forward for Europe?
Well, two reflections from my side to follow up, and I can pick exactly where the Taoiseach just made his comments. I think in Europe, our main strength is our unity. It is our internal market. And in this context, I think we need to be united and have a pragmatic approach when we can, but also be firm when we must. And we can be firm. That brings me to my second point, which is you outlined the challenges, Francine, and we keep being bombarded about the challenges, but what about the strengths that we have in Europe? Are you going to be talking to very important companies? Europe is leading and is one of the leading countries, and our companies are some of the leaders in areas which are quite critical for the future, from aerospace building to quantum computing to health to research in many areas. Our universities, our research centers are second to none. There is a very vibrant ecosystem of startups. Europe is not a superpower when it comes to security and defense. We have been relying for the last 80 years on this protection and this relationship with the US, which I fully agree with you is critical, it is indispensable. Partnerships go both ways. I would argue that this partnership is needed on both sides of the Atlantic and is beneficial to both sides of the Atlantic, but it is clear that we need to reinforce our capacity in the area of security and defense. I'm not surprised, because the European Union is a project for peace, that we're not a superpower in that area. But we need to work on it. It will take some time, but I'm quite confident that we will be able to be much more independent when it comes to energy, when it comes to security and defense, those areas where we maybe were weaker. And then, well, Europe will punch its weight and have an important role in this new global order. And I think to the benefit of the world, because we are a beacon of stability, democracy, and we are also a trusted partner that is being called upon by companies and clients, and I'm thinking like an EIB client when I say countries, governments around the world, because they know that we can be a force for good, you know, in this environment.
I like that. We'll come back to it. Maybe we should be thinking about, you know, the EU as a company and what should be done to attract more investments. But Prime Minister, so Montenegro aims to join the EU by 2028. First of all, is everything to plan, and how much of a priority is this for the government?
Absolutely. So everything so far has been going on plan. We've accelerated immensely in the last 2 years the accession, and just the fact that so many countries want to join European Union showcase that the EU actually has a lot of value to it, and it's a peace project. It's a project of values, common values, as well as the single market. So especially the countries, we come from the region that was very fragile and had like a lot of conflict in the 90s. We value peace maybe way, way, way more than some people who take it for granted. But, you know, we see through the Russian aggression in Ukraine that the things have changed, and people started understanding actually how peace is important to the higher project. But again, maybe not only talking about the benefits, talking about the challenges is also very important. And how can Europe go further? I mean, it's not in my position as still not a member state, but like as somebody coming from private sector and coming from the outside, I could say that fragmentation of the market that Draghi's report has I think hit the nail in the head is something that is very important to tackle. I think because of the AI, I think because of the geopolitics, we couldn't talk about AI a lot these days, unfortunately. I think the biggest benefiter of AI will be EU and India, for example. The countries that had consumer markets that used to be very fragmented by culture, by language, by many other things, AI will help us bridge these things. So we will be able to catch up with the markets that are not as fragmented consumer-wise, like US and China, for example, that have a single language, single, you know, very similar culture, et cetera, So EU has a big change to be the biggest benefiter of unifying the market through the AI, as well as, you know, like there are some other things I think that we could learn from the, you know, politics has to involve more business people and people with having, in the Congress, you have a lot of people with the business background. In Europe, we still, in parliaments, oftentimes we still don't have as many business people with the business backgrounds of people with that kind of mindset. So I think we need the pressure from within for the change. We all know we have to make that EU has to change, but we need also like people who will execute the change and make the real difference.
Okay, so now we go to the business, right? Yes. You, Nicolas Hieronimus, you're in charge of one of the biggest beauty companies in the world.
The biggest.
The biggest. and you're headquartered in France. Like, are you frustrated by some of, because then we have an entrepreneur, but what are you frustrated for in Europe, and what do you love about doing business in Europe?
Well, I think, first of all, just to build on Nadia's point, it's important to remember that we have champions in Europe, and that you can be a European company, you can be based in Paris and be a global leader. Actually, the beauty industry, which is not often mentioned, is an industry where out of the top 7 global players, 5 are Europeans. L'Oréal is the number 1. It's a 180 billion euro GDP contribution, 3.2 million jobs. So it's a big industry. And it's true that L'Oréal is number 1 in Europe, but it's number 1 in the US and number 1 in China. So it is possible. It is possible as long as you innovate, which will tied to the discussion around unique capital markets and how do you fund innovation in Europe. As far as we're concerned, we're very proud to have been named Europe's most innovative company by Fortune this year. We have like 725 patents, so a lot of innovation there. But today we feel, and going back to your question about frustration, that Europe doesn't support its champions enough. And that's all the discussions around regulation. As you said it, Draghi report was very clear. And I hear a lot of alignment on the need for simplification, for reduction of regulations whilst protecting our values, but there's no speed. There is no speed. It's not happening. And we can elaborate on EU being run as a company, but there's a clear decision process issue that prevents things from happening. And the title of this panel was Europe's treading water. How can it make waves? The problem with water is that right now there's a lot of current, whether it's technological or tariffs, and if you don't swim fast in current, you get carried away and you sink. And our message is, my question is, how do we make Europe's decision process much faster so that we truly support our businesses, both the ones that are already winning and, of course, the new tech and the new ventures that will need capital.
But why is it slow? Because they need to find the right policy, or it's because it's slow to implement, or because you need consensus?
Well, I think that, overall, first of all, it's, 27 countries.
It's a structural issue. Yeah.
It's a structural issue, 27 countries and more to come, a parliament, a commission, a council, and it takes forever. I mean, look, I'm not an expert on the details of Mercosur, but I know it's been lasting for 25 years, and I heard the news yesterday that the parliament was, challenging the validity of this deal to the European Court of Justice. So that is, I think, a demonstration of the complexity, and I have a lot of respect for the politicians who have to deal with it, but it is too slow.
Okay, we'll get to the politicians in a second, but Hélène Huby, I mean, you're often called the Elon Musk of Europe, right? You're kind of like a great hope for space exploration. How does it feel like to be an innovator and entrepreneur working within the European framework?
Yeah, it's first and foremost, it's a responsibility because indeed we've been so far very successful. The company is 4.5 years old. We've been able to raise the biggest seed, bigger Series A, bigger Series B ever raised by a space company in Europe. This is more than 300 million. In the past, actually 12 months, we raised 240 million, and 100% of this fundraise is European. So this is a message of hope. And we've signed almost 1 billion in contract for a product that never existed in Europe, which is a space capsule. So in 3 years from now, Europe is going to have its first space capsule. And actually, it's going to be co-financed by private investors and public money, and from private investors to the highest extent in the world. Like the Dragon capsule of SpaceX was financed 10-15% from private and like 85% from NASA. We are financing 40% of our capsule with private money and 60% only with public money. So to come back to your point about, let's say, perhaps hopes for Europe about what we have great, and also like hurdles that we are seeing as entrepreneurs. Hurdle is like sometimes the lack of ambition and focus.
Sorry?
The lack of ambition and focus. I really would love our institutions to think big.
How can we build global players? Because in space or in defense, it's a shared responsibility between companies and government. And we have money. Like, we're able to invest billions in projects. But sometimes we invest billions in projects which are not leading, world-leading projects. And sometimes we have billions like a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. So I think it would really help to keep the focus, which comes to my second point. We have a lot of people trying to regulate. In space, for example, we speak now about a European space law. I'm not sure this is what we need the most. What we need the most is probably a European space strategy, which enable us to become number one in the next 10 to 15 years. And I would love more people to work on the strategy rather than the regulation.
Yeah.
And the last point is, we have some financial people here in the room. I'm trying to attract the best talent in the world. And I can tell you the system of stock options in company, there is one in Germany, nobody understands. One in France, nobody understands. And so if we want to bring back the talents, and we have people, who've been working at SpaceX, coming now in Europe to sustain our mission of building space vehicles across countries, Well, I have to explain to them, to their wives, to their husband, how the stock option system of a startup is working in Europe. So I would love, we have one common stock option system, which is more attractive than the one which is in the United States. And this is how we'll be able to attract talents here.
Do you ever wish you were based in the US?
I decided to build this company starting with Europe, to scale it in the US. So we're in the United States, we're in the UAE. We want to be a global leader with European roots. And why did I do that? Because I believe in Europe, and I believe it comes back to what you were saying about peace. The mission of our company is to build space vehicles for humanity. It means every vehicle we built, capsule first and then rockets, we built it across nations so that we can share critical military and civil technologies across these nations. So we want to scale the European model of collaboration across the world. And that's why we started in Europe, because I think that's really important. Space is the future of humanity. We can decide to build it in a confrontational manner. And of course, some will do it because this is our human nature. But we can decide to build it in the way we've built the European Union. And this is what we're trying to do with the Exploration Company, so far successfully, actually.
Taoiseach, I mean, if, what would you do, what would you change tomorrow if you didn't need unanimity? Full stop.
I mean, I think that the single market, in my view, I think the Capital Markets Union are personal and our political challenges. I mean, you're correct. It's a structural. It's democracy too, by the way, which is a positive. And one of the most positive things Europe has going for it is it's a beacon, it's a bastion of free speech, freedom of assembly. All of these things are very valuable. Strong culture. A lot of people want to come to Europe to live. A lot of people want to come to Europe to work. So those are the fundamental strengths. But I think from a competitiveness point of view, certainly, like some of the omnibus simplification measures that have already been introduced by the President of the Commission have been slowed down in Parliament or have been not supported. And so that multi-layered structure is a problem. We're not a company. We're 27 member states, all political entities, polities that have parliaments and so on. So this is complex. And that's challenging in terms of efficacy and getting things done quickly. On the other hand, if you go through COVID-19, European Union probably responded more effectively than anybody else in the world, in my view, in terms of export authorization. It didn't prohibit the export of any component part of vaccines. It was the strongest donator of vaccines globally, and I think did a fantastic job working with industry. I was a health minister in the early 2000s. That level of coordination between the Commission and industry was not there. Wouldn't have been there when SARS erupted. It was there during COVID. I pay tribute to the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen and others. I think that was a very effective partnership. And Europe showed its strength and what it's capable of doing. And remember, the key vaccine, one of the key vaccines was BioNTech. It was a European vaccine, actually. Pfizer, and that's a good partnership. You know, they were a mega company. They managed to distribute, market, and so on. It became known as the Pfizer drug. It's kind of interesting. But actually, and it was a good combination and a good partnership. So I think those are illustrations of what can be done. But we do need, on the entrepreneur side, we do need more VC availability, venture capital and so on, and companies do need, and there is that sense in Europe that it's not as freely available to SMEs as a lot of our companies, some of their orientation is US in terms of venture capital. And that's a problem. That shouldn't be the case. We've had discussions in some sectors like health, for example, where there are significant barriers, where you have almost 27 individual competencies and in terms of regulatory bodies and so on. And so there are clear areas where we can simplify. And there's a political will to simplify. Definitely, there's a will in the Commission to simplify regulation. But the problem was referenced earlier of how you get through the different structures is the challenge.
Nadia Calvino, is it structural or is it also just a political cycle, right?
Well, I very much agree with what has been said, that in a way it's the challenge of Europe and it's one of its strengths, that we provide a message of stability to investors. So you know that there's not going to be a situation as we live with some other superpowers in the world, where you wake up in the morning and you wonder what happened, and then by lunchtime maybe it has changed, and by night it's a different policy. So Europe is trying to provide a very different message. It's one of the beacons. It's an anchor with a swiveling chain. So it can move, but your bases, your values are very clear. And I was thinking about this when Nicolas was talking about there are currents and the winds. In that kind of situation, you know what you need? A clear compass. Where are you heading? A strong leadership, which I hope tonight, we will see this strong leadership, and everybody rowing in the same direction. And I think that is the recipe for our success. And the second thing I really wanted to share, and the diagnosis of what needs to be done, market integration, large-scale investment, simplification, and I would add win-win partnerships around the world, and the Mercosur agreement is a very good example of what's going on in terms of Europe reaching out to the rest of the world and building on its strength as a world superpower in trade. The diagnosis is clear, and what I think we need to do is to get on with it and do it. And from the European Investment Bank's perspective, we're trying to contribute to all of them, and in particular mobilizing private investment. I wanted to just mention this venture capital issue, because indeed Europe is in a certain sense, and we had discussed this, Hélène, in one of our meetings, is the incubator of the world. So we have excellent startups, excellent ideas, technologies, talent, but then when these companies need to scale, they don't have a totally integrated market, and they cannot find 500 million, 1 billion that may be necessary at a later stage in the growth stage of their cycle. And that is an area where if we're going to try to the maximum to make a difference from the European Investment Bank, to be a catalyzer, to try to reach the necessary scale for Europe to also overcome that weaker part.
And I'd like to go on, and then the Prime Minister, but Nicola, I mean, when you deploy capital, is it more expensive to do so in Europe than it is in Asia or the US?
No, not particularly for us. I mean, I have to say, I'm not sure we are very representative, because we are a cash-rich company. We generate a good cash flow, so we don't have particular issues in deploying capital. For us, going back to the topic of discussion of speed, it's true that decision-making in China or the US is faster for very good reason. And I'm an absolute passionate European. My mother worked for the European Space Agency, so I'm like totally, I've got the blue flag and the stars tattooed somewhere. But that's why I'm so eager to find ways to find solutions. I totally agree with you that there has been some movements, there have been some omnibuses that have been launched, which is not a decision, which is a process to get to a decision. Yeah. But at least, as far as our industry is concerned, some absurd bans that were in the making, like ethanol, you were talking about the COVID, we were manufacturing hydroalcoholic gel for everybody during COVID, and because ethanol is potentially alcohol, carcinogenic in drinks, it would have been forbidden in fragrances, in hydroalcoholic gels. That has been pushed back, but things that, which I've already talked about last year, which is the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, and I think that there are some pharma people in the room, two industries alone have been deemed responsible for all the pollution of water, which is pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, no detergents, no pesticides, no food, no coffee, nothing. And that's been voted, and since then we've all been trying to, everybody agrees that it's not fair. We are totally in favor of the payer-polluter thing, but everybody that pollutes should be paying. And that's typically something that's been, where I have most European leaders saying, yeah, you're right, it can't be just two industries that are going to pay the bill. But nothing moves. It's not even been put in the latest omnibus. So that's where you can feel a little bit of frustration, despite my blue tattoo, is that I wish we could find a way to be a bit more fast.
Expensive, yeah.
Prime Minister, how do you think leaders should rebuild trust around growth?
I think so. In regards to the competitiveness, I'm not 100% sure that actually it requires 27 states or 28 or 29, 30 states. That's number one. Number two, also, it's very important to know that everybody, for example, agrees on Draghi's report. I never met anybody who doesn't agree. Of all the leaders, they all agree on it. Why it's not being implemented is the question. The number one, from my point of view, is number one, that the execution capability of the politicians or people like in charge in Europe is a bit different from the the layers, etc. That's not because here people are used to making policies and also negotiating on policies and then presenting policies. Actually, as a politician in modern Europe, you have to oversee execution of policies. You have to oversee and follow up and be a manager. You have to be a manager. You cannot be like somebody like, oh, I'm delegating this to somebody else. You have to take in charge. You have to make the reform till the end, to follow up, to see everything, because administration as well has a different dynamics as well. They think there's, okay, this is impossible to do, etc. The million of times the administration comes to me and says, this is impossible. Yeah. At least 10 times I have proven them wrong. And this is what politicians have to do in modern Europe. Have to. They're obliged to do it. Secondly, I also think, even if there's 50 member states, I think we will all agree that Draghi's report should be done. So it's not a number of states that's making a difference.
Is it capital? Is it access to money?
All the things that he has mentioned, capital markets, all of these things, enforcement. Courts in Europe don't function. They're too slow and they're unpredictable. So you have, for example, founders who are clueless if their stock options are going to be enforceable or not in Europe. In US, in Singapore, in UAE, in UK, it's going to happen. In Europe, you are clueless because the courts sometimes, they can decide this, they can decide that. The uncertainty around the courts and the speed of the courts is probably slowest in the world, not counting the countries that have lower. So this is something that we have to work on, the speed and the mediation of disputes or quick dispute resolution mechanism. Something like SIAC, for example, Singapore International Arbitration Court, is necessary. Arbitration is a speedier way because arbitration-wise you can do mediation in 6 months. In the case of the commercial court, full agreement, there's a 3 or 4 years. So these are quick measures that we should do. And we should also encourage yes, we need a capital union, and we need the market to be really single market. So,
Prime Minister, can I ask you? Is this also? A lot of countries are maybe distracted by trade and tariffs war. How for Montenegro? How present or not is Russia at the moment?
We have to focus. If we really want to get competitiveness done, everybody has to focus. Number one priority: competitiveness. I think we are too much now bogged down by foreign politics. And Europe is is on foreign policy. We always have to, remain important. But if competitiveness is important, it has to be for all of us, all the leaders. This is number one focus. Let's get this one right. Let's now all focus on this because we have too many topics we are focused on, and you cannot be doing too many things at the same time. Yeah. The only problem there, the challenge is, in February, Antonio Costa's convened a meeting of all leaders to focus exclusively on competitiveness. And it's kind of an away day to do that, and that's important. But you can't ignore what's happening in the world. And so we have a war on the continent of Europe.
Yes.
Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. I agree with President Trump in terms of the extraordinary carnage that's happening on the battlefield. Generations of young people losing their lives on all sides. It is a catastrophe. But it also has opened up security and defence issues in Europe, and it has transformed the psychological sort of disposition of Europe towards its own security, vulnerabilities. We're in a world where critical undersea infrastructure is under threat, which is critical to economic security. We have energy connectors. All of that is and we have cybersecurity attacks on a daily basis. So we can't ignore that either. I think on the structural thing, there has been work, and Germany has led work in terms of, okay, if we have enlargement, surely we have to work on the speeding up decision making, which we actually, even though we would be a holdout country for the veto on tax and things like that, for example, nonetheless we do acknowledge that if we have, and we support enlargement, I support enlargement all the way because we were a young country, poorest country in Europe in the early 1970s. We joined the European Union, it transformed us. So I'll never deny anybody the right to join the European Union in accordance with our standards and so on like that. But we do need to look at QMV on a lot of issues. We do need to look at how we can speed up decision making at the council level at least. And so I would acknowledge And we should be clear about that as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will make it slower, we will make it more inefficient, and we cannot afford to do that. I'm positive in terms of what we can do. You're right about the political cycle, but actually the political cycle right now is strong positive disposition to simplification of bureaucracy, and the Commission is in the same space. So we've got to work hard with the parliamentarians to make sure that whatever we bring forward at one level can get passed at the parliamentary level.
And is there anything that you're optimistic about, that you're seeing maybe a sense of urgency from policymakers or politicians?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic actually. Number one, about the kind of talents that we are building, because I see more and more universities having a mixed curriculum with entrepreneurships and trying things, failing, doing things with their hands. I mean, here in Switzerland, Zurich and also in Lausanne, we have two amazing examples of like very, I would say, concrete curriculum, and I think this is a great strength in the US, which is now more and more here developed in Europe. So I'm super optimistic about that. I'm very optimistic also about funding. I mean, there is now this European scale-up fund, which is being setting up. So this is great. And also, and this is for me even more important, if I may, a little bit like, provocative, because public money is amazing, and I'm super grateful that the fund is happening. Private money is also very important. I don't want that to become a country. I'm speaking about Europe because I also have a blue flag, which every time we want to do something, we ask for permission, or like we ask the governments to help us. Like Musk built Starlink without asking, any money from the States first. And this is, I think, the mentality we need to have. And this is why I'm so hopeful, is that we have now second, third generation of entrepreneurs who are building funds here. And I can tell you, because I have most of my board is actually entrepreneurs and who were like super successful, like building Wise Transfer, building Skype, etc. And they are now reinvesting in Europe, and they are sharing with us their knowledge. And this is so important because we need this know-how to scale our companies even faster.
I mean, growth is also having great thinkers in your country. Do you think, because of what's happening in American universities, maybe this is Europe's moment to attract talent?
We are attracting top talent. We are having actually in our company people leaving the United States because they want to contribute to something bigger. And since we have this collaboration mission at the very core of our company, some people left SpaceX, or some top talents of NASA decided to join us because of the mission. So we are seeing that on a daily basis.
Yeah, I just think human capital is the key to the European Union's future. And that's why the Horizon programme, you are seeing the next budget, next 7 years budget that we're going to work on this year. We've got to prioritise funding and research and development, funding and education, and the development of human capital, and try and run counter to the debates that have risen about migration and stuff like that. We need to be very clear. If we do not develop the capacity to attract human capital into Europe, we will not grow as an economy. We're successful in Ireland on this. So far, we're very conscious of the challenges, but the attraction of high-quality people that can work on industries such as your own, I think, is critical. And I think Horizon, and that's where Europe needs to invest more in.
I wanted to just make a connection between some of the points that have been put on the table, because the example of vaccines ticks many of the boxes that we're discussing. Europe is becoming a refuge or a sanctuary for researchers around the world. Well, if you see that in your country you can no longer research in the area of vaccines, obviously you come to Europe. We did develop the vaccine during the COVID pandemic. I remember I was a minister at the time. I remember in January, February, they said, never will we have a vaccine in less than 2-3 years. By December, people were getting vaccinated. And you know what we're doing right now, and the European Investment Bank is transforming pledges into money so that we can build 4 vaccine manufacturing capacities in Africa, so not just supplying the vaccines, but allowing them to develop this capacity, one of them with BioNTech in Rwanda. So actually, a lot of things are happening that are contributing to a strong role of Europe in the world. But, we're treading the water, but how to make the waves. And I'm very grateful to have this panel, because at least we can communicate in this very important forum.
what actually Europe is doing in so many areas that gets bogged down by the noise. And I would also want to emphasize the point you said, focus, you said focus. We really need to try to avoid being trapped by the daily noise. Yeah. Deal with the priorities, and bringing peace to Ukraine is number one. Yeah. I totally agree. Then competitiveness, and then get simplification done. And then I think the power and the potential of the continent, I mean, we've lived it through history. So, you know, if we're united, I always say we're unstoppable, and I rest my case.
So, I mean, the case of Russian aggression in Ukraine is absolute priority, obviously, but it's also a case for more Europe, for defense union, for more united front, and that is actually it's a galvanizing factor as well for other things. So for me, for somebody that was like as an economist, it's unbelievable that Europe could come up with a monetary union, but cannot come up with some other unions that are much easier, actually, because monetary union is basically the highest degree of sovereignty of a nation, right? Printing your own money, having your own currency. But you gave up on this, but you cannot give up on something that seemingly much more simple. That is kind of a paradox, especially in the modern world as fiscal policies with so many mandatory costs that the state has to pay, social, salaries, you know, now defense and all of the other things. Your capability to manage fiscal policy is not, you know, is it centralized in Brussels or is it done at the national level? I don't know how much value is in keeping it national level vis-a-vis making it federal. So I know a lot of people are going to be controversial.
Steady,
but,
yeah.
But I'm saying, it's one step at a time. I fully agree. You know, but again,
the danger, yeah, it's the balance between. I mean, the bottom line is, democracy, you have to be connected to the people on the ground as well. So it's a real balance. I'm not. I mean, it's an interesting. And by the way, we have Brussels overlooking, you know, the Commission and how much you're spending. We now have the new midterm sort of program that we submit to Brussels in terms. But countries have been varying that since time began. Yeah. You know, and big countries as well as smaller countries, and but it has created some degree of fiscal framework and discipline at a macro level, which is important. But to bring the people with us is very, very important, because if you get too distant from the people, the entire project gets lost eventually, and the edifice comes tumbling down. I say this as a politician who studied politics, and we've an electoral system that creates fragmentation by definition, but still. It's given where we are in current politics, I'm not so sure that would bring the people with us.
Let's not forget that, because it is extremely important. Okay, we have 5 minutes left, and actually to each of you, what are you most optimistic about growth, potential of growth in your industry or in the EU in the next 12 months?
Well, you know, I think first of all, we see that despite everything, the economy is pretty dynamic. The FMI just increased its forecast for 2026. And if I look at Europe, I think, you know, according to everything was said, we have the talents. We have, I think, values that are attractive to these talents. We have innovation capacities. We have the biggest markets. And so it just takes really playing as a team. I was talking about Team Europe last year. I think if we can really play as a team that acts fast, I think our growth potential is huge, because you know, I see in my field in beauty, you know, French or European beauty is something that makes everybody dream. So we have a lot of things that we can offer, whether in space or in cosmetics or in health. And I think that's what makes me optimistic. So I'm very confident and bullish for my company, even in this context, and being a European company.
Hélène Huby, what are you most optimistic about for the next 12 months for Europe and your industry?
Yeah, so for space in Europe, I'm actually very optimistic around the capacity to finance ambitious projects, because the pressure we have, it's a question of life or death. And I see that we start thinking more and more united. I'm optimistic also around, and I said a few words about that before, the talents. We see new mentalities of young people coming with a very strong entrepreneurial spirit, willing to make a huge difference. And the last point, and perhaps I will surprise you, But I want to stay optimistic about the transatlantic collaboration. We are growing very fast in the US, and I'm in talks with NASA and the European Space Agency to build a transatlantic man-rated capsule. Because I believe that what we're seeing now is somehow you were talking about currents. Why not, a tsunami? But I want to plant the seeds for the future, and I strongly believe in the democratic collaboration between the United States and Europe. And I think that we also need to act hopeful, not naive, but hopeful, because that collaboration is important for the world. And so I don't want to think short term.
Do you think we'll get something more concrete in the next 12 months?
I mean, let's just imagine that, for example, in the next month, we could agree on a, sorry, I'm taking my example because, working in space, but we could agree on a collaborative transatlantic man-rated capsule program between US and Europe. What does it say to the world? What kind of hope it brings, right? This is awesome.
If I may, just for instance, because you were mentioning the interconnection, I was talking about French or European beauty, but L'Oréal has got 20 American brands in its portfolio that we're exporting to the world. So it's really,
Absolutely.
We're a global company with global values, and this, I'm totally in line with Hélène on the need to have this very strong connection with North America.
Prime Minister, what are you most optimistic about for the next 12 months for European growth?
So I think Europe is again a place, a cradle, but also a beacon of light in terms of the peace project, in terms of the values, in terms of rule of law, in terms of the human rights, and these are the fundamental things that founders or the people, innovative people, care about eventually. They care. This is on the humane level, the quality of life and other things that Europe also provides for, is something that eventually Europe can be very attractive, given that we solve the like minor problems in regulations and other things that are burdening. But obviously, I think it's Europe has a very strong case of attracting talent from all around the world, treating them fairly, treating them with respect, treating people with ability to express themselves to creatively or in an entrepreneurial way. And I think I'm very bullish on Europe. Again, I also want to say that I'm a big, I have also a big tattoo, blue tattoo. So all of us, maybe we have different opposing views on some things, but again, we all wish the best, and I think we are all very bullish on Europe.
Taoiseach?
Well, first of all, I would be optimistic in terms of, notwithstanding all the tensions, strands and difficulties and so on like that, in terms of there will be progress in simplification of regulation in the next 12 months and in the years ahead. There will be progress in terms of investment in research and development and in human capital and the broader area of education in the time ahead in Europe. And also in the values of Europe. There's a battle going on in the world, but I think the values of Europe, the fundamental ones, will sustain. Yeah. And the transatlantic, there have always historically been different strands in America in its approach to the world. And in Europe, likewise. But I would actually be optimistic in that transatlantic. I have to be as an Irish because historically, over 30 million people in America claim Irish descent because of the famine in 19th century Ireland. So we have Irish all over America. Those relationships will sustain in the time ahead. And other European countries have similar diasporas in the US as well. And I was reminded when you were saying about L'Oréal and all of that, one of my favourite films was Casablanca. Don't be wondering what it was, and Bogart to Bergman at the end, we'll always have Paris.
Nadia Calvino.
Well, no, I think, to summarize what the colleagues have said around the table, and coming from different backgrounds, but at the end of the day, a lot of our trust and optimism is based on the resilience of our systems, of our networks, the resilience of the structure that is underneath the daily, I call it noise, there are many words we can use about these turbulences. There is a strong foundation underneath. I also hope and I have trust in the strong foundation of our democracies. Because actually I think what the Taoiseach said in terms of bringing the citizens with us and the rise of populism and extremism and the conflict and the The fact that we have angry societies, I think, is probably one of the key challenges in terms of the structures. But I have hope also that will also be resilient, so that then we can, make reality all those beautiful words that you have and wishes that you have put on the table. And I want to finish with this. On a daily basis, Europe continues to be the best place to live, particularly if you're a woman. I want to also emphasize this point, and that is also a very strong strength in this brave new world.
Well, thank you all for a wonderful, engaging panel, and I wish everyone a great rest of the forum. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.